Welcome, dear viewer, to the first episode of Pathfinding Escapism, where I ramble on about different concepts, scenarios, etc. in fantasy, sci-fi, etc. from that as well. As you can tell, this is somewhat more unscripted than usual, but we're just throwing things out there, see if it sticks. Now, what is Pathfinding Escapism? At the moment, it's more of a loose set of ideas or idea, but the general concept is essentially just digging through different escapism ideas, again, fantasy, sci-fi, etc., whether they be pre-established or somewhat creative and new, I suppose. Leading by example, today's episode will be concentrated on the whole idea of magic. And what I would like to do at this point would be to just find the basic dictionary definition of magic itself. Not looking at D&D 5th edition or any other sources of magic like Harry Potter, that sort of thing. Just looking at the very base dictionary term of magic and working from there. And maybe extrapolating from different ideas from, as I said, Harry Potter, wizards using wands, D&D 5th edition, where I cast fireball, you explode, that sort of thing. I'm just generally working from the ground up from magic, from the dictionary definition. So, according to said dictionary definition from Oxford Languages, magic, the power of apparently influencing events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. Very open and generalistic term. So I suppose in order to start our pioneering journey in the ideas that we can extrapolate from magic, we'll have to delve deeper into what they mean by supernatural or mysterious forces. I think mysterious is a very obvious one. It's unknown, we don't fully comprehend, etc. Or if you look at the definition from supernatural, same place, Oxford Languages, a manifestation or event attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. So I suppose what that leaves us is what magic can be is some form of nature that we just don't understand. Some force might be outside of nature that we don't understand. And looking back on it, everything I just said, think of it now, it all seems to be just stemming from that idea that magic, whether you know it from movies, books, etc., games, just the fact that magic means influencing events by mysterious, not understood forces out of our control, possibly, as well. I apologise for my rambling, but again, we're pioneering. This is a journey, let's say. We are just on our journey, slowly figuring things out as we go. So I suppose with that basic understanding or idea, just very minimalistic comprehension of magic understood, we can start the building from here. The power of apparently influencing events by mysterious or supernatural forces. I suppose what we should look into is how you influence these events and what are these supernatural or mysterious forces. And one of the things that comes to my mind is the best way to describe it would be superpowers. Like, a common one, super strength, just lifting 10 times what you could normally lift before. Breaking down said super strength into the how you're doing this and what's enabling you to do said super strength, I should say. I think relies on the setting as a creative person you'd want to go with. Because I'm in a somewhat medieval / fantasy mood, I want to go more that direction of someone having super strength in a sort of fantasy setting. And with said setting in mind, I suppose it's just about how you flavour things. For example, is this magic of this super strong person like a miracle, so coming from like a god that they believe in? Is it something far darker? Like, I don't know, he's made a pact with a demon or something. As long as he drinks the blood of 10 babies a day, he gets super strength. There is so many ways you could go with like just the hows and whys this supposed person has super strength. That whole journey of trying to justify this one supernatural magical thing, it's just quite fascinating to me. And I think that's what's inspired the core of pioneering escapism. Just the fact there's like so many options and untested waters, even with the amount of, I guess, tropes. Not tropes, but what you see in movies, like again, super strength. You've obviously got Superman is the one I can think of, where like I don't know the ins and outs, but he's from an alien planet, and for some reason the sun makes him Super Plant Man or something. But again, that's not a fantasy setting, that's more of like a modern time setting. But the point still stands, how there's so much untested water just from looking at the dictionary of definition of magic to begin with. I suppose this sort of way of doing things would be good for like building a world on the ground up. I think what I want to do to make this, well, to be quite frank, podcasts, audio session, much more entertaining to listen to, rather than just hearing a guy ramble into his microphone for an hour or so. I don't know how long this will be, but there we go. Is maybe changing from building up from the ground up from magic and working our way backwards. For example, one thing I thought of today is about the concept of using wands, staffs, as basically tools to aid in casting magic, which should give us a good springboard and frame of reference, I think, to again make this audio session a lot more interesting, for one, and two, the whole point of pioneering escapism, to try and find different ideas, try and explore, break new ground, or even just tread old ground and try something new. Or hell, like, try old ground, don't change anything, and just having fun, I suppose. So, imagining the whole concept of, you've got, let's say, the stereotypical wizard. He's got the pointy hat, the robes, and he's got a wand in one hand and a book in the other. And he's, I don't know, casting lightning out of his wand. My mind immediately goes to the functionality of everything I just explained. I'd like to think his book has some form of arcane scripture that he can refer to for his spells. I'd like to think that his wand is how he actually casts the spells, some way, somehow. And I've got some interesting ideas about wands that later on in this audio recording, whomever you may be, dear viewers listening, might find quite hilarious, to say the least, and perhaps very useful in your own storytelling or pioneering adventures. But moving back to this imaginary, again, we'll just call him Wizard for now. Of course, one of the things I didn't mention about was his robes. Obviously, I mentioned the robes initially, but what I mean is, I mentioned about how his book contains arcane scripture, his wand is how he actually casts the said spells. But presuming, as I said, he's shooting lightning at his wand, in my head, which was a combat situation, not like, he's trying to power a steam engine or something, although I'm not sure if you could power a steam engine with electricity anyway. But regardless, I imagine this wizard is in a fighting scenario. Now, why in any sort of fighting scenario would you not be wearing armor? And of course, there's magic systems that says, like, you know, oh, the iron in armor or whatever stops the flow of magic. But I want to go less, if we're talking video game terms, less like nerfing and more side grading or buffing as to why he's not wearing armor. So maybe he's not wearing armor because his armor is his robes, essentially. His robes is his armor, rather. And maybe the robes have a magical property where they're highly cut and stab resistant against like normal humans, which I'm presuming this imaginary wizard might be fighting. Or perhaps maybe if he's not wearing armor because he's being employed to not fight humans, maybe he's just got a great big target like, well, I want to say dragon, but dragons typically are massive and breathe fire and are quite magical in themselves. I want to say maybe instead of a dragon, a huge beast. And that I can see. He's not wearing armor because he doesn't need to get in range to fight the beast. He can just unlimited power and just lightning bolt like from far away to deal with this beast in some capacity. And this is important to note, dear listener, that one of the things I find quite helpful when like you're imagining, not even writing stuff down, just imagining possibilities and that, is context really does help. Like if you want to take this stereotypical wizard with the wand, the book, the robes, the hats, etc., you could either add him into... You can make the context and add him into it, basically molding the context around as to why he looks and does the thing he does, or the opposite way around, where maybe you mold the wizard character around a specific context that you haven't changed. And I point this out because as an artist, as an artist in many things, as much as it is nice to go balls to the wall, let's say, to create these things with no limit in that, I find sometimes limits actually, for example, like being forced into context or being able to just stick with a design and trying to make it work, unlocks a lot more creativity and makes things a lot more fun sometimes. And don't underestimate how much limitations can be a useful tool. Just thought I'd put some useful advice in there, but moving back on track with our wizard. I want to do something more fun, more straight to the point, and that's what I mentioned earlier in regards to the wizard's wand, or more specifically, wands in general. As I've mentioned, my idea for why the wizard has got his wand is because that is the tool that enables him to obviously cast magic. Yes, he may have to scripture it in the book, but without this tool, this wand, he's basically, the book's useless. And how I like to imagine this, how the wand works and how he's even able to cast magic is... I'm going to try and be brief as to this point because we don't want to be here all day. We're already, I think, around 14 minutes in, and I don't want to go over an hour. I want to keep this audio thing very relatively short, hopefully. But we'll see where we go. But anyway, my idea is, let's say in this hypothetical wizard's world, that magic is not everywhere, more like magic is imbued in certain things. I've got somewhat of an idea of what it could be imbued with, but bear with me when I get back to that. But that's my simple concept of why there's magic. It's just a thing that we can't understand that's imbued into things. The book's purpose is to essentially take that imbuement, turn it into runes, and turn said runes into a language that the wizard can verbally speak, and almost like a battery, once he says the words and casts it out with his wand, that's it, that spell's used up. Might be somewhat overpowered if you have an entire I guess, what's the word, phone book of magic spells. It depends how big the writing and runes are, I suppose, but anyway, I digress. And how I would think the wand would work would be, whilst the wizard's physically holding the wand and has maybe trained his life to attune to it, learn about the magics in the wand and different imbuements or whatever, that the wand itself is not imbued with magic, but is a conductor for magic. Like, and this is where I'm referring to from earlier when I said bear with me about certain things can be imbued. I think what I meant was conducted. So you've got certain things that either imbue or conduct magic, and those certain things would be things that could hold life. From the very minor sort of life, if that's the right word, like plants, fungus, very basic insects, I suppose. Like that sort of material, like wood, insects kiting, or mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Those sort of materials, because they have the ability to hold life, maybe that gives it some form of imbuement or conductory power. So the wand itself is like made from wood. Makes sense. And I was thinking that with wands, you have different levels of wands. If you have a basic wooden wand, the imbuement / conducting isn't going to be as powerful. You may have a powerful spell, but just a basic wood wand is going to, well, dampen the spell. And what the wizard could be holding is a wand such as, obviously it's made of wood, but I'm thinking like in terms of design and working backwards from it, it's made of wood, and it's got a copper wire from the base of the handle where you grip the wand that wraps around, has a nice sort of crystal on the end. And how I sort of justify that is the copper wire is more, like, again, conductor, essentially. I haven't really figured out the caveats. It was more just a design thing, to be honest, with the copper. But there could be some sort of caveats. Like, maybe not it holds life, because it's an inanimate object, but maybe copper has some sort of spiritual significance that allows it to be imbued or conducted. And maybe the crystal on the end, for example, could be a focusing point, and the reason that can be imbued or conducted is because, well, if you think about it, crystals in the real world, and maybe in this world as well, that I think they just, if I remember correctly, crystals, they just sort of slowly grow over time underneath the right conditions. So that could have a significant magical property because, well, it's an inanimate object, but it almost grows like a tree. That could give it some sort of significance to give it like a focusing power or something. Again, very loose details, but that's how I sort of think the traditional robe-wearing wizard would work with his book and wand. So basically what you have with what I've just described is your stereotypical wizard with just, granted, the looseness of my terms and why it sort of happens, but if you were to expand on that looseness and make it less loose, you would have this stereotypical wizard, granted, but a very lore-rich and story-rich reasons as to why he's a very stereotypical wizard. And moving on to the hilarious thing, because obviously this is very stereotypical. This doesn't get to a apply to what I've just said in terms of how the wand works and that, but also towards like I suppose most wand using wizards are in Harry Potter, let's say. My hilarious take on this is what's what's stopping either a stereotypical wizard or my wizard from upscaling the wand? And I don't just mean like, oh, he's made a wand the size of a cane, or he's got a full-blown staff. I mean, like, we've cut down an entire tree, wrapped it in like loads of copper wire, and found like one of those like giant quartz crystals and attached it at the front. Granted, it'd probably be very expensive. Possibly not if it's a magical way to do things. Depends on the limitations and that. But if you were able to do that, just make a wand the size of a tree, like, would that make it, like, amplify the magic even more? Like, make it like a magical cannon? Like, I guess I suppose it's dependent on the spell. Like, let's say I wanted to cast Fireball, like the D&D version of Fireball, like the explosive, essentially, out of the wizard's wand. And because the wizard's wand is more, I guess, magical because of how it's made, and the spell's quite powerful, it might amplify the magic. Especially if the wizard's quite a trained, powerful wizard. My question is, if you could, like, upscale a wand to the size of a tree, would that, like, maybe explosion that was the size of a grenade under normal powerful magic, and maybe instead of a grenade with a combination of the powerful wizard, powerful wand, a powerful spell, instead of just being a grenade, it's like I'm not sure what's bigger than a grenade, maybe like a rocket launcher or something, maybe the 3 times explosion range is a grenade. Maybe if you could use this tree, like, I'd imagine. I just have a funny thought that we're gonna invade with a bunch of soldiers or something. Shield wall up. We have to worry about the wizards, but don't worry, we should be fine as long as we keep separated from different units and that. But no, there's this like gigantic tree that like makes a gigantic fireball. And again, this works in stereotypical wizardry as well. Why does I just thought. And it depends on the spell, obviously, but why don't in Harry Potter... Well, for one thing, why don't in Harry Potter just use guns? Is always one thing. But if they wanted to stick to wands, right, why don't they have in the castle... I can't remember what the castle's called in Harry Potter, when they're defending against... not Dumbledore, Voldemort, that sort of stuff, and the Death Eaters and that. Why... I don't know what spells exist, but why don't they just say they have a massive... I suppose it's a movement in the wrist as well. I think about it. But my point still stands. Like, if you could somehow like upscale a wand to a tree, like, well, I guess, and it works essentially, or works better. Like, what chaos could you do with that? Like, with what spells? Obviously, Fireball's like an obvious one, just great big, like, explosion. But I'm trying to think of other spells that, like, could be potentially in this wizard's world, or maybe just rip something from D&D. Like, I'm trying to think of a funny spell. Like, let's say less of a spell in D&D, but more of a cantrip, but Mage Hand. And you had to require arcane focus, and you had a tree. That was arcane focus and made it more powerful. Could you, on like a battlefield, just summon this giant hand that can like carry, instead of just £5, like 500 pounds, and just slap people, and it's basically indestructible at that point? I guess, yeah. I think I'm moving off track and starting to ramble, but I think of stuff like that, it's good to have just the funny side of things. Like, you could even potentially add it into your world. You have to be quite careful, so it doesn't be overpowered and leaves you with potential things that you might not have thought of. I should know that as a dungeon master, like running D&D, that like, oh, I've made up this idea. Oh, how do we abuse that as players? But anyway, before I stop rambling, I would like to whoever's viewing this, if they have any sort of funny or even effective ideas with the tree wand, please post it in the comments, because that'd be a very fun read. I think I want to finish off with a couple of miscellaneous ideas. I think there was more ideas I had throughout to record, but I want to be able to do these audio sessions in one sitting for like an hour or so. But I'm going to, as I said, miscellaneous thoughts I had that I don't want to sort of forget about, and I think are quite interesting. Just little ideas to throw out there that could maybe be expanded upon by, again, the listeners, whoever's listening, or maybe myself even. One of these ideas I had was like, how would Firebolt works? Not Fireball, but like D&D 5th edition Firebolt, where essentially you have a ball of fire, and obviously it's a cantrip. You just cast it and it flies out, hits someone, and does a mini impact of fire, essentially. In D&D it does fire damage, but I think it would also do a little bit of like force or blunt, if you're talking about like, damage type snap, because the fire is instant. For it to basically catch anything alight, it'd have to be like napalm, I'd imagine. Or thermite. But as far as I understand with D&D 5th edition, Firebolt, it's a ball of fire, travels through the air, and when it hits something, it dissipates. Maybe it's like really hot, and that's why things probably might be able to catch on fire and just only does fire damage. But I think the main idea I sort of wanted to get across is a spell or cantrip I thought of, which would be sort of like Firebolt, but it's more mechanically interesting, I say. So rather than just a ball of fire that stays as fire throughout the air, hits something, dissipates, I was thinking of a spell called Sun's Kiss. And to clarify, this isn't just with D&D, this is like in general. And my idea for Sun's Kiss is basically, instead of a ball of fire, it's like a ball of light. Although we could even go a step further and call it a ball of plasma, hence the Sun's Kiss. Superheated plasma that travels through the air, maybe has a short range in that, because obviously has to cool and that in the open air, whatever. But the basic idea is that the Sun's Kiss is either plasma, some form of light. When it hits the target, then it starts to burn away like a fuel, and it keeps on burning until the orb of light, I guess, has basically completely dissipated. So like sticks to the target and just keeps burning like a thermite, I suppose. And not only I thought of that as a mechanically interesting thing. For example, my problem with like Firebolt is like, if someone's wearing metal armor and it's just literally fire that basically dissipates when it hits the armor, you might warm them up and they feel a bit toasty for a second, but unless it's like superheated fire, I don't see how that would just damage someone wearing full plate. But with this, it doesn't even have to be superheated fire to do damage. It physically sticks on someone, like the plasma it is, or the fuel it is, and Sun's Kiss holds as the surface of the sun, and until the fuel runs out, it just keeps on burning. I'm not sure how powerful a spell that would be in terms of balancing, because you have to think about balancing even outside of video games, or like in stories and that. Which is another neat tip. As you can tell, I'm getting somewhat flustered and tired. But stuff like that sort of spell, Sun's Kiss, if it doesn't work as the same as Firebolt, what other practical utilities might you have of it? For example, Sun's Kiss, if it burns away like a fuel, guess what? Upscale it and use it as a sort of fast burning fuel, or augment it to slow down the burning, so it just you're fueling something for longer. Again, you might be moving more away from fantasy into more like, I don't know, steampunk, like boiling water, or you may have trains that rely on this Sun's Kiss, with like mages who basically supply it to the train system. But yeah, that's one of my missed ideas I wanted to sort of throw out there, is instead of just a damaging spell, like how it sort of damages things, you could use it for other purposes. As I said, like a fuel source. So that's quite interesting. Another basic idea I just had pop into my head now is obviously other than the author or writer or whatever, what is stopping, or let me put it this way, what is providing the list, I guess, of spells? Now, if you're going off D&D, like, you got the evocation spells, the divination spells, schools of magic, that sort of thing. But what I'm thinking of is, why couldn't you just mix and match different elements of spells? Not even that. Why don't you just create new spells, like invent new spells, essentially? If you had the ability to invent new spells, or mix and match even different effects, and I guess alchemy or whatever, combine different things and get new effects, I don't think that'll leave you schools of magic anymore. You'd just be able to like arms race new spells. And the reason I bring this up is I think we could go less boring with that. Not boring. For example, these spells do damage, these spells do revealing stuff or whatever. You'd have more multi-purpose spells. You'd have but I think what I'm trying to get at is you get not just a multi-purpose spells, but the really funny stuff that the mad mage had come up with. Like, he smoked some magic mushrooms, whether literal magic mushrooms or figurative, let's say, and he's like, "Whoa, dude, I had an idea. What if I made a spell that made you want to wee for 10 hours straight or something?" I don't know. But you could go a really funny route if you could be able to invent spells or mix and match components of different spells. And I find that quite interesting as well as my second missed idea. And my final missed idea, my third and final, is, again, this is more an open-ended one, because I'd like to see what people come up with what I'm about to say. Obviously, in a lot of systems or IPs or whatever, magic is only best way to describe it is only available to a select few, or at max, I'd say half the people. Or if it's available to a lot of people, it's highly dangerous. But one thing I just thought of again for my third and final idea, I want to leave out there for people to sort of experiment with, is, what if everyone had access to magic in some capacity? I'd imagine in the world that would take place, it'd be very, very chaotic, because people are really creative, let's say, for the most smallest problems, or not even problems, even hobbies, essentially. Just what if magic was available to everyone? What nonsense would that prescribe? And B, is there a way you can make magic available for everyone without it being deadly to everyone, without it being costly to people, I guess? If you had a system where magic was freely available to everyone because it was just, I guess, abundant, maybe, I don't know what could do this, but would there be a way to make it a more serious IP or world. Because yeah, you could make it just have a comedic, just weird, everyone has magic world. But would there be a way where you could, I guess, other than like in the world you have an authority that regulates the magic, but just a way to have everyone have magic and have it still be a serious story? Well, I think the answer to that is yes. But I'd like to see someone accomplish the challenge of doing something like that. Who knows, maybe it's not as challenging as I think it is. Perhaps it's really, easy, or I'm just not getting something at the moment. But that's where I will leave you, dear listener, to. Essentially, something just that little bit of inspiration to keep your ideas going, whether you are a creative or you just enjoy my ramblings. I'm hoping in the future these audio recordings, pioneering escapism, will be much more structured, even though I am still just sat in the front of a PC, but regardless. And I suppose the last thing I should say for whoever was listening, or is listening, I will say thank you. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for getting this far as well, if you've gotten to this far. Even if you just skip through the video, I'm very happy, essentially, that you've took the time to explore with me different ideas, different possibilities, and in general just having a laugh and having fun. And with that, I bid you adieu. Farewell, fellow pioneer.